On the edge of Atlanta, where the morning air hangs heavy with the tang of jet fuel and the echo of metal on metal, a woman moves through the world unseen. Her name is Lorene Brooks. Every day she bends her back to the bellies of private planes, wiping the sweat from her brow with the back of a gloved hand, making machines sing for men who will never know her name. But everything changes the morning a billionaire, eyes sharp as a hawk's, mind tuned to numbers, not faces, finally sees not just the work she does, but the way she does it. This is not a story about miracles, but about dignity, labor, and humanity. How one woman's perseverance can tip not just a life, but a whole system, a degree closer to right. 6 in the morning, the sun still a low orange bruise behind the city. Lorene's boots slap the cracked sidewalk one after another, past rows of chain link and scrubby grass, her breath a little cloudy in the crisp air. She keeps her head down, hands deep in the pockets of her faded blue coveralls. The name patch, Lorene, has lost its color, but the stitches are tight. She never minded the early hours, not really. It was the hours after, the long trudge home, that wore on her most. This morning, her eyes feel gritty, and when she blinks, she imagines she can still see the inside of her little apartment, the way the sun filtered through the blinds onto the face of her sleeping brother. She'd left quietly, just like always. The Falcon Sky maintenance hangar sits behind a fence bristling with cameras. Big white letters, paint peeling. The concrete shimmers with puddles, old rain. Lorene flashes her badge at the sleepy security guard, nods without waiting for a reply, and heads into the hum and hiss of the morning shift. The place smells of old coffee, grease, and kerosene. Inside, the voices are low and familiar. Radio, laughter, the mutter of men who've worked here too long. She heads straight for the Gulfstream G700, a sleek white beast parked like a swan amid a flock of smaller jets. The job is written up on a clipboard. Fuel system, irregular pressure. She reads the notes, then tosses the clipboard on a cart. Her fingers are sure as she snaps open the first panel, her breath measured. Above, in the glassed-in break room, she can see her supervisor already cradling a mug, eyes flicking down to her, then away. Someone's drawn a smiley face on the window in condensation. Lorene ducks her head, wipes her palms on her coveralls, and gets to work. Voices drift down from the catwalk overhead. She's just the help, don't bother her. The dispatcher's voice, nasal, dismissive. Lorene pretends not to hear, lets her tools answer for her. Her jaw tightens. She's learned not to react. Sometimes she wonders if she's fading, becoming part of the machinery, invisible, interchangeable. The wrench slips. She bites her lip, tastes metal and blood. When the first break comes, it's barely past 7. She ducks into a quiet corner by the maintenance lockers, flips open her lunchbox. It's empty except for a crumpled napkin. She remembers. She'd left her sandwich on the counter for Eli, her brother, with a note. Eat before school. Love you. The memory stings, then fades. She sits for a moment, fingers resting on the battered tin. The rhythm of the hangar continues around her. Voices, laughter, the clink of metal. She closes her eyes. Once, she'd sat in lecture halls, learning to solve equations, dreaming of designing engines, not fixing them. That was before her mother got sick, before tuition became a fantasy, before it all shrank down to making rent and keeping Eli safe. A black SUV glides onto the tarmac, windows gleaming. There's a ripple through the maintenance bay, a quiet shuffle, a tightening. Lorene glances up, watches a man in a pressed navy suit step out. followed by a slim woman with an iPad clutched to her chest. The man doesn't look at anyone. He moves like he owns the ground. Jack Stanford. His name passes through the hangar in whispers, like a cold draft. CEO, oil money, jets, rumors. Lorene keeps her eyes on her tools. "Who's that?" The assistant's voice is a high note, just loud enough for Lorene to hear. "She works here?" The words catch, hover. Lorene doesn't turn. She can feel the weight of the glance. Quick, appraising, dismissive. Her pulse ticks up. She sets her jaw, keeps her focus. A commotion breaks out near the tail of Stanford's jet. Voices raised, an edge of panic. The chief tech hustles over, running a hand through his thinning hair. "Stabilization systems tripped," someone calls. "Displays are dead." There's a tightening in the air, a brittle urgency. Lorene hesitates, then steps forward, slow at first, then with purpose. "Hey!" A hand on her shoulder. The supervisor's face red and irritated. "Let the team handle this, Brooks." She shrugs him off. "You want it fixed or not?" There's a hesitation, a split second when the world seems to pause. Lorene slips past, her mind ticking through possibilities. She drops to her knees under the fuselage, fingers feeling for the access panel. Sweat beads on her neck, slides down between her shoulder blades. The voices fade to a background hum. 3 minutes. Wires traced, a reset, a fuse. She breathes out slow. The display lights up above. Relief and confusion. Someone stares. The chief tech's voice, sharp and skeptical. "She guessed, right? Pure luck." Lorene stands, wipes her hands. "It wasn't luck," she says, voice steady. "It was a stuck relay. You'll want to check your diagnostics." Jack Stanford looks at her for the first time. His eyes are light, piercing, his face unreadable. He holds her gaze a moment too long, then, "And you are?" Lorene lifts her chin, shrugs. "Just a mechanic." She meets his stare, waits for the dismissal. He watches as she climbs back under the belly of the jet, her coveralls streaked with oil, her hands sure. Something flickers across his face. Curiosity, maybe, or the faintest edge of respect. He stands apart, silent as the techs gather, murmuring. Lorene feels the heat of his attention, and for the first time, it unnerves her. The day blurs into afternoon, heat pressing in through the open hangar doors. When the shift ends, Lorene walks home, legs heavy, a thin film of sweat drying on her skin. Her apartment is small, windows rattling when the freight trains pass. She kicks off her boots, drops her bag by the door. Eli sits cross-legged on the floor, assembling a toy airplane, tongue caught between his teeth in concentration. The little plane is missing a wheel. "Hey, star pilot," Lorene says, crouching beside him. He looks up, grins. "Did you fix a big one today?" She ruffles his hair. "Always. Someday I'll teach you how." She notices the toy jet, bent and battered. "You want me to fix it?" He nods, solemn, holding it out with both hands. She sits with him until the shadows deepen and the city lights blink on beyond the blinds. The next morning, no one mentions her save of the day. Instead, she gets a terse summons to the office. The supervisor leans back in his chair, a file open on the desk. He doesn't look up. "You're not a hero, Brooks. Don't get clever. You're maintenance, not command. Don't forget that." Lorene nods, jaw set. She leaves the office, closes the door quietly behind her. The hangar is loud with laughter, music, the smell of burnt coffee. She takes her place, back among the machinery, her body moving on muscle memory. That night, as she scrubs the grease from her hands, her phone buzzes. A number she doesn't recognize. She hesitates, lets it ring once, twice, then answers. A low, measured voice. Lorene Brooks? She pauses, cautious. Speaking. It's Jack Stanford. I'd like to meet. Off the record. She's silent, searching for the catch. I have questions, he says. She weighs the silence. When and where? His answer is quiet, certain. Tomorrow. Cafe by the terminal. I'll be there. She doesn't say yes. She doesn't say no. She listens to his breathing, then hangs up, the click echoing in the stillness. Eli looks up from his coloring book. Who was that? Lorene hesitates, then smiles, soft. Just work, baby. Just work. She sits beside him, the day settling over her like a heavy blanket. But somewhere beneath the tiredness, there's a quiet spark, a question, a possibility, barely daring to hope. The city hums beyond the window. In the quiet, Lorene sits very still, feeling the world shift, just a little, under her feet. The cafe by the airport was quiet at 8 in the morning. The kind of place where old pilots nursed their coffee and checked the weather on faded cell phones. Sunlight crept across the floor tiles, catching dust motes in the slow air. Lorene arrived early, boots clean, hair pulled back under a borrowed baseball cap. She sat by the window, hands curled around a mug, watching the traffic on the runway through smeared glass. She felt the weight of the day in her shoulders, but she kept her back straight, her gaze steady. Jack Stanford walked in like he always knew where to step. He wore a gray suit, no tie, eyes sharp as ever. The world moving around him like he was made of stone and they were water. He spotted Lorene immediately, nodded, then slid into the booth across from her. He set his phone on the table face down and studied her like she was a new engine diagram. You always this early? His voice was easy, a little tired, but curious underneath. Lorene glanced up, measured her words. When you fix jets, early is the job. She hesitated, sipped her coffee. Why did you call me? He didn't answer right away. The waitress came by, poured him a cup, smiled a little too long. He barely noticed. He drummed his fingers on the table, watching her. I watched you yesterday, he said finally. You saw something my techs missed. You fixed it without backup. Why? Lorene looked down at her hands, the dark lines of grease still in the creases. It was going to turn ugly if I didn't. That's all. He considered her, head tilted. You always like this? No fuss, just in, fix, and gone? She met his eyes. Life's not as tidy as a resume, Mr. Stanford. He smiled, barely. You know engines better than some of my engineers. Where'd you learn? Books, life, some school until I couldn't. Most of it's repetition and paying attention. She looked back at him, level. You're not here to ask about my education. He paused, taken aback. For a moment, the CEO mask slipped. No, I'm not. He traced a circle on the table with his thumb. You ever think about moving up? Trying for a tech supervisor spot? My company runs an advanced training center across town. They'd be lucky to have you. Lorene shook her head, almost laughing. I have a brother at home. He needs care. I work these hours so I can be there for him after school. I can't do nights or travel. I can't just pick up and go. Jack leaned back, nodding slowly. Flexible schedule then. We can do that. He shrugged off her protest before she could voice it. I know talent when I see it. People like you don't come through the door every day. She stared at him, long and searching. You think this is charity? He grinned, almost. No, I don't do charity. I do investment. Silence lingered. She studied the scratches on the tabletop. You give me the schedule I need, I'll try. His relief showed in a slow exhale. Deal. Start Monday. By noon, word had trickled through the Falcon Sky hangar like a cold draft. Lorene, the mechanic, was moving to Stanford's tech center for a trial. The reaction was immediate. Some shocked, some muttering, some eyes narrowed with envy. On her last day, no one said congratulations. She packed her things quietly, handed in her badge. The supervisor just grunted, barely glancing up. Monday, the air was thick with the smell of new paint and bright linoleum. Stanford's tech center was all glass and light, rows of spotless tools gleaming on the benches. Lorene kept her shoulders square, tried to ignore the looks as she walked in. Men in polo shirts and pressed slacks paused mid-conversation, eyebrows raised. Someone at the desk whispered, "She's from the hangar?" Another, "She doesn't look like the rest of us." Bob was waiting at her workbench. A big man, pale, arms thick with muscle, grin too wide. "First day, huh?" he said, clapping her on the back, just a bit too hard. "Let me know if you need to find the broom closet." A few others chuckled. Lorene just set down her toolbox, eyes steady. "If you got questions, ask. I'm here to work." All day, Bob watched her. Too close, too careful. When a new schematic came in, he tossed it on her bench. "Let's see what you got," he said. Lorene bent over the papers, tracing the wiring paths, thinking out loud, catching a subtle design flaw in the hydraulic relay that no one else mentioned. Across the room, one of the engineers, a woman named Uma, wire-rimmed glasses, soft voice, listened with growing interest. At lunch, Lorene sat outside in the sun, lunchbox on her knees. She ate quietly, eyes closed against the chatter. A shadow fell across her. Uma stood there, holding out a sandwich. "You missed breakfast," she said simply. Lorene hesitated. "You don't have to. Consider it a trade. You saved me a headache on that relay." Uma's eyes twinkled, kind and sharp. Bob was less welcoming. He started with little things. A spilled box of bolts near her feet, missing wrenches, a cold shoulder in meetings. One afternoon, he leaned over and muttered, "This place ain't for people like you. Just a heads up." Lorene kept her head down, doubled her effort. She studied diagrams long after her shift ended, ran simulations on borrowed laptops, asked questions, learned. Every mistake she made, she fixed. Every little success, she tucked away for herself, a private victory. "Knowledge don't need a diploma," she said once to Uma, late at night over a spread of blueprints. "It goes to whoever keeps asking." The real test came one stormy Thursday, when the center's big Falcon jet was rolled in for a rush repair. Bob was assigned lead. In the bustle, he accidentally swapped out a critical part in the hydraulic system, one that would fail under pressure. Lorene spotted the switch, heart racing. She knelt by the open panel, double-checked the numbers, then traced the problem back, step by careful step. She called out, voice steady, "We got the wrong part in here. This'll blow the valve in seconds." The room went silent. Bob glared, red-faced. For a moment, no one moved. Then Uma stepped forward. "She's right. If she hadn't caught it..." She didn't finish. The techs clustered around, murmuring. Lorene replaced the part, checked the system twice. The jet left on schedule. That night, as she packed up, Uma stopped her by the door. She held out a battered book, thick, pages softened with age. "Aerodynamics," she said. "It was mine. You should have it now." Lorene traced the gold lettering with her finger. "You sure?" Uma smiled. "You earned it." News traveled fast. At the next team meeting, Lorene's name was mentioned. Not as a warning, but as a solution. Someone muttered, "Didn't think she had it in her." Someone else, "She's good, you gotta admit." Jack Stanford showed up that afternoon. Arms folded, eyes soft with approval. He found Lorene by the engines, grease on her hands, hair wild under the cap. "You did good today," he said. She looked up, wary. "You get used to the work, not the rest." He sat beside her on the crate, rolling his shoulders. "I was nobody once. Ran from foster care to a factory. Didn't know anyone. People saw what they wanted." He paused, the air around them humming with machines and old ghosts. "You make me remember that." Lorene didn't reply. She just nodded, slow and thoughtful. The next morning, a printed sign was taped to her locker. "Certified Mechanic in Training." Someone had written it in bold, careful letters. She touched it, then went to work, a little taller than before. By the end of the week, her ideas for streamlining inspections were making the rounds. A few texts started coming to her for advice. At a meeting, the director paused when she spoke, considered her suggestions, and nodded. "Let's try it." But shadows lingered. Bob filed an official complaint. "Not certified, not qualified, not one of us." Rumors floated, whispers in break rooms, glances across the cafeteria. Lorene heard it all. She straightened her shoulders, turned to her work, and let the engines answer for her. But that evening, as the storm clouds broke over Atlanta, she wondered how much longer she could walk the line between being seen and being allowed to stay. The conference room was cold, its walls a blank gray that swallowed up sunlight. Lorene sat at one end of the long table, hands folded, the hum of the air conditioning too loud in the silence. Her coveralls looked out of place among the pressed shirts and tailored suits. At the far end, the company's director scrolled through a folder, face unreadable. Jack Stanford sat beside him, arms crossed, eyes steady, giving nothing away. The HR manager cleared her throat, looking at papers she didn't really need. "Ms. Brooks, you've been called here regarding concerns raised about your credentials and your methods on the floor." Lorene could feel her heart pounding, slow and heavy. She searched the faces before her, some curious, some guarded, some just waiting for the meeting to end. She saw Bob leaning back in his chair, mouth a flat line, arms folded. Uma caught her eye and gave a small nod. Jack spoke first. "Sir, Lorene has prevented 2 major incidents since arriving. Her record is clean. Her work is excellent." The director barely looked up. "That's not the point. We have procedures. Certification is required for safety and insurance." He glanced at Bob's report. "Your file shows initiative, Ms. Brooks, but we have rules." Lorene took a breath, felt the words push up like stubborn grass through concrete. "You don't have to be somebody to do something that matters." She paused, feeling the heat of her own words. "I know what I am. I know what I can do. You gave me a shot. I did the work." A silence settled, long, uncomfortable. Someone coughed. The director tapped his pen, considering. Finally, he spoke. "Ms. Brooks, what would you say if we offered you a chance to become certified? Officially. You'd take the tests, pass them or not. Fair?" She looked at Jack, who nodded once, encouraging. Uma squeezed her hand under the table. Lorene nodded. Yes, I'll do it. The days that followed blurred into late nights and early mornings. Textbooks spread out across the kitchen table. Flashcards taped to the fridge. Eli watched her sometimes, quietly tracing the outlines of engine parts in her notes. He didn't ask questions. He just watched, proud and solemn. The exam room smelled of old paper and stress. Lorene's palms sweated on the form. She worked each problem twice, sometimes 3 times, her lips moving silently over the questions. When she finished, she felt wrung out, emptied. The results came on a Friday, tucked in a plain envelope. She read the letter 3 times, hand shaking. She passed. Word spread quickly. The local news wanted an interview. Black woman mechanic changes the aviation center. Lorene sat before the camera, nervous, her hands twisting in her lap as the reporter asked about her journey, about her brother, about the work. She answered plainly. No speeches, just facts. I do what needs to be done. I learn what I don't know. I take care of my family. There's no secret. The news clip went farther than she expected. Emails arrived. Young women asking for advice, older men offering congratulations, workers of every color and accent telling her their own stories of being overlooked. Some of the messages were from young women, some from men who had started at the bottom and recognized something in her words. One afternoon, Jack found her at her workbench, her new badge clipped to her chest. They're talking about starting a scholarship fund, he said, dropping a folder on the table. For mechanics. Your name's on it. Brooks Wings Fund. She stared at the folder, not quite trusting her own eyes. Why me? He smiled, weary and honest. These people need to see what's possible. Lorene became more than a mechanic. She started teaching, at first in the break room, then officially, running workshops for new hires, apprentices, and anyone curious. She stood in front of rooms full of faces, some doubtful, some eager, and showed them what she knew. How to read a diagram, how to trust your hands, how to listen for the difference between a normal hum and a warning rattle. At the terminal, someone mounted her old work badge behind glass, next to a photo of the Gulfstream jet and a small brass plaque. The quote underneath read, "The work that matters isn't always the work people notice." Lorene saw it once, paused, smiled quietly, then moved on. On the day of the new training center's opening, Lorene walked up to the stage with Eli beside her, clutching his toy airplane, now missing most of its paint. He stood straight, proud, his hand in hers. When they called her name, she let him hold her old badge up for the cameras. Later, they sat together on the steps outside, the sound of planes in the distance. Jack came to her, older now, a little slower, suit hanging loose on his frame. He shook her hand, then pressed his other hand over hers. "You taught me something, Lorene," he said, voice rough. "I saw people all my life. I never really looked." She smiled, tired and warm. "That's all anyone wants, Mr. Stanford. To be seen." His eyes softened. "I'm retiring. Time for a new story. Yours, I think." She watched him go, the echo of his steps fading into the wide, bright hall. She looked at Eli, who beamed up at her, the old badge still in his hands. The next day, she led a group of new students through the hangar, her steps sure and easy. They listened as she pointed out the engines, the tools, the places where the light hit the floor just right. She caught sight of her own reflection in a polished wing, steady, a little older, changed. The system was still slow, still heavy with old rules, but in the small ways that mattered, Something had shifted. Lorene walked at the front of her class, her voice carrying in the bright space, and the new students followed, seeing her, learning, ready to do the work that would last after them.